My name is Roy Franco. My date of birth is 11/10/33. I was born in Tontitown.
And we have your written permission for the interview, but we want you to say on video that you don't mind if we do the interview.
I don't mind if you do the interview.
Thank you. And who were your parents?
My parents were John Franco and Teresa Dupo Franco.
Okay. And tell me also about your grandparents. First, your dad's parents.
Well, I didn't know too much about my grandparents because I was awful young. Now, my grandmother was in bed for about 11 years. And I don't know exactly what her problem was, but she never was able to get at. Because back then they didn't have all this, facilities they got now.
Okay. Tell me about your family when you were growing up as a child. Who were your brothers and sisters?
My brothers and sisters, you know the names? Primo Franco, Mary Franco, Tom Franco, Rachel Franco, Lou Franco, Connie Franco, and myself, Roy Franco.
Great. Now tell me, what was your family's business? What did your dad and your family do for a living?
My family worked on a farm. They had a farm.
Tell me all about it. What was your farm like, and what did you raise? What did you do?
Well, we also had cattle, and we had 8 acres of grapes. And that's about all we done was milk cows, and we had grapes.
So, if your family business was farming and raising grapes, what was your part in the family business?
My part of the family?
Business.
Well, I worked, you talking about what I worked? I worked at Ball Canning Company, 31 years. That's what they made tin cans.
Okay. Tell me more about that. What was it like, and what all did you do?
Well, what I done was I worked on a can line, and then from there I went to driving a lift truck for probably 20 years on a lift truck. And then I went to the sweepers. I kept the floors clean and all that, and that was about the extent of it.
Where was the business located, and who else from Taneytown worked there?
Well, there were several people from Tontitown worked there. Did you want their names? Leonard Penalto.
If you don't remember, that's okay. Who else?
Leonard's the only one I can really think of right now.
Okay. Tell me more about what you would do helping on the family farm. What were some of your chores and your jobs helping with the farm?
Well, the whole thing. Just had milk cows and helped milk cows and had the grapes. And that's about all on the farm. That's all there was to do.
What about yard work or other chores around the house that you might do to help? Was there any of that?
Well, I never was too much of a gardener. I always went to town and bought my stuff.
Tell me about your earliest memories of Taneytown. What do you first remember going into town, and what was it like?
Well, the first was going into town was in Taneytown. Was at the Taneytown Mercantile store, and then also we had a John Millar store. It was kind of a grocery store, and it was just located down here about a half a mile, and that's about the extent of it.
Well, tell me about the people that ran those stores. What were they like, and what were the stores like?
Well, the people who run it was Artemani's, and Millar was one of the stores, and they had groceries, bread, meat, and whatever, And they had feed also too. They had feed.
Uh, where else do you remember ever going out to eat in Taneytown? Were there restaurants when you were growing up that you might have gone to eat?
Not really. We really eat at home. Back years ago, we used to eat at home. We didn't go out to all these restaurants and eat. We butchered our own hogs and we made all our beef and everything. We butchered them here. That's what we just eat here at home.
Well, what was it like at mealtime in your home? Who all would help with the food, and what was it like? Did y'all eat? Tell me your routines at home.
Well, my folks done all the cooking, so that goes. And of course, we help. Peel potatoes or what have you. Just regular dinner meals. We made our own spaghetti, made our own sauce. Because years ago we didn't have the money to buy all this stuff. We had to make our own.
Tell me about where you lived, all the different places you lived growing up. Your first place, and then how different places you lived until you ended up here.
Well, the first place we lived was down here about a mile and a half north. And then the second place was right here. This the other place I lived. There's two places.
Tell about what they were like, the first place you lived. What was it like?
Well, years ago, it was terrible. The house was terrible. I mean, we papered the walls of the ceiling with newspapers. And us kids would sit around the chairs and see if we could pick out a word up there and see if we could find it. But we papered our house with newspapers.
Tell me about how you did it and why you did it. Was it for insulation, or tell me more about it?
Do what now?
Was it for insulation, or why did you do it?
You mean there wasn't no insulation?
Why would you paper it? You said, was it for...
Oh, how we paid for it?
No, why did you paper it? We papered it because...
Oh, because we wanted to cover up some of the cracks.
Okay. Tell me about where you went to school and what was it like?
When I went to school, what was it like? Well, it was, I enjoyed it very much. Of course, back then we had the nuns, they was pretty strict, but yet they had a reason to be. But no, we had fun going to school. We had recess and all this, so it was fun.
Tell me, maybe, what was a typical day like? What time would you get there, and what would you do during the day, if you remember?
You mean at school?
Yeah.
Well, I remember going to school about 9 o'clock in the morning and we got out at 3:30. And I liked it.
Who were some of your classmates and friends that you went to school with?
Untitled, Edward Penalto, Barbara Rookie, and Leonard Penalto. Most everybody here in Tontitown, all of it, in my age, went to school here.
Who were some of the teachers that you remember? Who were some of the nuns and the...
Well, I had Sister Benaldo, Sister Xavier, Sister Quintilla, Sister Bernadine, and that was it.
Any of them were your favorites, or any of them stand out that you remember?
Well, I don't know that I had a favorite or not, but I had to like them all, whether I wanted to or not, because my dad, he was the boss. He'd tell me what to, but I always liked the nuns. It was...
Tell me about where your family went to church and how big a part of your life church was.
Well, my family went to church here in Tontitown.
Tell me more about it. What was it like?
What was it like? Well, it was more of a family deal back then, you know. Everybody got along, and they all enjoyed going to church and being quiet in church and all that.
Tell me about your first communion. What do you remember about it, and what was it like doing your first communion?
Well, we had to study some of the prayers, so that when we got up to the communion rail, they'd ask these questions, and we had to answer these questions, and that was about it.
Okay. Who were some of the older church members that you remember? Some of the elders in the church that you might have remembered from those days.
From back years ago? Oh yeah, that was my brother Primo Franco, Pete Panalto, Gilly Panalto, Leonard Panalto, and Albert Zupo, and Robert Zupo, and Vernon Taldo. I mentioned him, Vernon Taldo. And there was others, but I can't remember too much about them.
Talk about when you finished school and decided to go to work. Talk about that. When did you finish school, and when did you go to work, and then kind of walk me through that history.
Well, when I finished school, I went on the farm. I was farmed, and then of course in later years, I went to work at Ball Canning Company, which back then it was Heakin Can Company. When I first went to work out there, and then of course the last place down there was Ball Canning Company. But from the farm, I went to town, went to Springfield to work.
When you were a young kid running around in Taneytown, what would you and your friends do for fun?
Well, we ran around, I don't know if we had any fun or not. Because we didn't do much running around back then. I mean, as far as running around Tontitown, because there wasn't nothing here to do.
Well, what would you and your family members do for fun? I mean,
Played cards and played bocce.
Talk about bocce. What was it, and why did you play it, and who all played?
Well, you had this little ball. You would throw down halfway the court, a little past the court, and then they had the striped balls and they had the plain balls. And we'd play in partners. I may have the striped balls, they may have the plain balls. So what we do is the one that got the closest to this little ball got the point. And we played, and if there were just two of us playing, if I went down there and had the closest point, then this other guy had to pick the ball, see if he could get closer than I would. And then we kept playing till we may have 1 point, 2 points. If we got all four of them closer than the other four, we got 8 points.
Do you remember the old timers playing when you were a kid? And talk about that. Do you remember them playing? And
yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, years ago when they played out in the yard. They didn't have no bocce court back then. They just played out in the yard. Grass and all. If there's any grass, they just played out there in the yard.
Do you remember them? Tell me about them. Did they speak Italian when they played?
Yes.
Tell me more about it.
Well, that's probably about all they knew was Italian back then, because it was Italian community and they all spoke Italian. So, I mean, when they get out there, if they made 8 points, they call it secco, and that was in Italian. If they played one ball, it was uno, and and so on. But they always spoke Italian. I mean, if they'd ask one another questions, they'd be in Italian. And whoever they asked, if they knew the answer, they speak back in Italian. But years ago, it was all Italian. And see, my grandmother, when she was in bed at 11 years, my dad's mother, if I didn't go by and visit my grandmother when I went by there, my dad would get on to me, said I need to stop and see his mother. Well, when I'd stop to see her, I'd go in there and I'd say good morning if it was morning, you know. And she'd say, huh? And I'd say good morning, and she'd say, huh? And she wouldn't ask me to say it in Italian. And that's how I learned the biggest part of my Italian from her, because she would not answer you if you didn't say it in Italian. I mean, that was it.
Tell me more about your family. Tell me, what were they like, your parents?
Well, they was good people. I mean, they taught quite a bit of one another, and they helped one another, and they just, as a family, they was just good people.
You said that the kids would do stuff for fun, maybe play cards. What would adults do? When you were a kid, what would the adults get together and do for fun?
Now, do what now?
When you were a kid, when you remember back in Taneytown, what would the adults, your parents and their friends and neighbors, what would they get together and do for fun?
They got together and they played cards. Just about every night, and they played this mortar, which was an Italian game with their hands. Like if they'd sit out there at 2, and if your partner had 2, that was 4. And then the next time shit again, they had 1, that was just 1, and the next, if your partner had 1, that was 2. And that's what they done. Played mortar. That's what they called it. Now, why, I don't know that.
Anything else you can think of they did for fun?
No, not really. Not really, other than help one another. And when they were doing it, they all pitched in and had dinners and just sit around and, you know what, just talk about different things, you know, and that's what they done for fun. There wasn't much to do back then. They didn't have nothing.
You talked about that earlier, is how people would help each other. Tell me some examples of that, or tell me what you're talking about. Like they'd neighbors that come together and help each other with stuff.
Well, they'd talk about raising grapes and how they prepared, you know, grapes and where they would sell them and just exchange back and forth and ask one another if they put out tomatoes today or if they picked their corn, if they crushed their corn. That's what they did. They sat around and talk about farm work.
What do you remember about the Taneytown Grape Festival? What's your earliest memories of the festival? What was it like when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, all they had was a Ferris wheel and this and that. We had the dinners, which didn't amount to very much. It wasn't very many people. And the rides they had, of course, back then the rides were only about 10 cents. But then back 10 cents was a lot of money back then. So that's about all I can remember of this, other than the dinners and the carnival was all I can remember.
Well, how has it changed over the years? What's it like now compared to what it was like then?
Well, it's a lot bigger now than it was. We got the dinners now that are way out, you know. I mean, there's several thousand people that eat at the dinners, and it's a lot bigger. Of course, the price is a lot bigger too. And of course, we got people come from all over to the Grape Festival every year because it's just a once-a-year deal. And it used to be 1 day, and then it got up to 3 days, and now they got 3 days of Grape Festival and 2 days of armband, but they only have 3 days of meals. It's a serve meals.
What did you do to work or help with the festival, if anything?
What did I do? Well, I worked in the halls, swamping, cleaning up tables, this and that, and I was on the yard committee picking up trash and stuff. We had about 15, 20 kids that come in, and we'd walk around there with them, you know, just kind of supervise them. and they pick up trash, clean up the grounds, and then we give them a ride on the Ferris wheel or something. That's what we give for cleaning up.
What haven't you had some family members compete in the Queen contest over the years? If so, tell me about that.
You mean the Queen members?
Didn't you have some granddaughters or daughters?
I think, well, yeah, I had two granddaughters.
Tell me about it.
Like what?
Well, who were they and what did they do?
Oh, well, Cecily was one of them, and Caroline. Of course, then I had cousins, Virginia Franco.
Well, how big a deal was it for the girls to compete in it? Tell me what it was like, what you remember about it.
Well, I mean, what I can remember is a lot of hard work. They used to go out and sell tickets. If they give away pickup or card, they sold tickets. They went from town to town selling tickets. And of course, then the parish here in Tontitown would give us so many tickets for us to either buy or sell. And that's about all it's remembered as.
Anything else you can think of about the Grape Festival? Any memories of it, or?
Well, the only thing I remember is a lot of hard work.
Do you remember any fun times going to the Grape Festival, or talk about them if you do?
Yeah, I've had fun times going to the Grape Festival. We'd go up and we'd get to visit with friends that we don't ever see. And maybe eat lunch with them or something, just have dinners outside. That's all I know.
What other local traditions or events do you remember? Things that went on in Taneytown? Like maybe traditions at Halloween or things like that, maybe different holidays.
Well, Halloween, we used to go out trick or treat. And we go to somebody's house, wear these masks at somebody's house, and they'd have to identify who you was, and they had candy, to give out candy. And that was for Halloween. Then, of course, Easter, what we done was we had Easter eggs. We'd color Easter eggs and hide them out in the yard, and the rest of the kids used to go out and try to find them. That's about it.
Any other traditions or things you can think of you used to do here in Taneytown?
Not really.
What other stories or things about Taneytown that maybe things I haven't thought to ask about that you can remember that are interesting? What are they?
What all about Taneytown?
Anything else you can think of maybe I didn't ask about?
Well, you probably didn't ask. Where we first lived in Taneytown.
Tell me about that.
Well, we lived right next door over here, but then we bought the old hotel in Taneytown, and we stayed in it for a while. But when we bought this farm here, they didn't have no fences around here, and back then we had the horse and buggies back then. We didn't have a tractor years ago. We had the horse and buggies. And me and my two sisters would take the horses back down where she used to live, down about a mile and a quarter where I told you. Every evening when they got done, we got out of school, come in, took the horses, went back, and then in the morning we'd saddle them up, bring them back up here. And then they worked the rest of the day, we went to school. But anyway, we owned the old hotel down here. Of course, it wasn't in use, like I told you a minute ago, it wasn't in use. But we tore it down. We tore it completely down. It was a pretty big hotel. But it wasn't in use. It was all bad shape, we bought it. And they only had 4 lots up there. That's where this hotel was, there's 4 lots. But I forget the whole thing about it. But all I remember is we lived in this old hotel for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, I guess, before we built up here.
How old were you at this time?
Well, I was going to school, let's see. It had to be probably about 14, 12, 14, I don't know.
Tell me the story about how you met your wife. Who's your wife and how'd you meet her?
Well, I kind of met her through my dad and her dad. And my dad knew her dad, and then he found out that he had these two daughters. And he thought maybe I should go sail on. So I did. And I went to this drugstore, and there she was, working in the drugstore there. And I just got started talking to her. And then the first thing you know, we started dating. And that's about the whole thing.
Talk about, in your own words, how the town was real small when you were a kid and then how it's gotten bigger. What are some of the changes you've noticed over the years from a little bitty town to a much bigger town?
Well, the only thing I remember is we had a smaller grocery store. And then we had the other grocery store down here on Barrington. And then, of course, we had the old church. And we had the old school, and the sister's home. And that's about it.
If somebody who'd never been to Taneytown came to you and said, Mr. Franco, tell me about your hometown of Tontitown. What's it like? What would you tell them?
What would I tell them? What's it like? Well, I'd have to tell them that first thing I wouldn't be living here if it wasn't good. That was number one. And then the people in Tontitown were very nice people. They got along fine. And it was just a nice place to live because everybody done their thing here, and it was just kind of more or less kind of a get-together like.
If somebody said, hey, I'm thinking about moving somewhere in northwest Arkansas and I can live anywhere I want to, why Taneytown? What would you tell them to that?
What would I tell them? I'd tell them to go back home with him, but no. I couldn't tell them to go any place besides Taneytown.
Why is that? Why would you tell them that to come to Taneytown's a great place?
Well, because I live here and I know it's a good, clean town to live in. I wouldn't want them to go somewhere else to live when I live here and know that this is the only place I would live and the only place I would like them to move here.
And then one last question here. If someone came to you and said, finish this sentence for me. My favorite thing about Taneytown is, how would you say that sentence?
My favorite thing about Taneytown? It's a good place to live. The people are very friendly. Of course, back then they had a lot of people moving in, but they were still real friendly. And that's the thing I liked about living in Taneytown. We was just close people here.
We were talking earlier about what kids did for fun. Do you ever remember going to any of the movies or
yes,
that kind of stuff?
Yes,
if you did,
yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, we used to go to the movie down at Elm Spring. And what we'd do is, we'd go up, and there was about 4 of us kids. They would meet up here at this T. And of course, the movie, the Elm Springs were down here, just like I told you a while ago, down about 1.25 miles. And then we'd all get together and go down to the movies. But they had the movie under a tent up here at the old school at Elm Springs. And then we'd go down and watch these movies, these scary movies. And we'd come back. Well, I had to walk home from this T on down to my house and we'd watch these scary movies, and these scared me to death. And I used to take my shoes off and walk down the road. I was afraid to make any noise. But that's the whole thing about the movies were out under the tent. That's all it was.
One other thing, do you remember whenever the local men played baseball here in town?
Yeah.
And if you do, tell me about it. When did they play and what did they do?
Well, yes, they played up here at the what they call the luncheonette. which is right across from the Venetian Inn. They had a baseball field right there, and they played both ends. They played every Sunday morning. They'd go up there. There'd be so many on each team, and they'd play baseball. They'd play like 9 innings of baseball, and then they'd all disappear and go home.
Do you remember watching in the games? Who were some of the players you can remember?
I remember, well, of course, I remember my oldest brother, Primo, Fred Chola, Gus Chola, Gabriel, Henry Bill, and Models Sideway. I remember that old man played. And I guess that's about it.
Who do you remember what towns where the other teams were from? And
Well, back then, yeah, they mostly played amongst themselves.